Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Once again, very grateful to be joined by one of my favorites, one of your favorites, Graham McNeill. Welcome back to the channel, Graham.
Hello again, Mira. It was lovely to come back and chat to you.
I know, and you've got so much going on. I know you're really busy with your new project,
hmm
Dwarves of Winter. So thank you for giving me some time. How is all that going?
It's going really well. We've got the internal pages that we're going to use on the campaign proper, and they're all coloured and lettered now, and they look really amazing. It's Ricardo's art, Vittorio's colours, Dave's letters. It just all it ties the story together.
Yeah.
It looks great. It's the comic that it looks like the kind of comic that if I picked up and looked at it on the shelves, I'd be like, "Yep, taking that home with me." So
Yay.
I'm really pleased with how it's shaping up, and we go. The campaign goes live in about 3 and a bit weeks, on November 12th. So it's shaping up really nicely.
It's all happening, and I was overjoyed because I've had a sneak peek of some elements of it, and it is, we're talking about Lords of the Lance today, among other things, and Wolves of Winter has a very, the resonance I found was this epic kind of scale uh, story where you'd taken elements from folklore and things, and then of course there's the spiciness of like all is not well and demons
Mm,
and things coming along. So it was really interesting for me to see how you were approaching one set of legends and another with
mm.
Lords of the Lance. So we get to see that really epic Viking setting from you.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun. I mean, anyone who's read any of my Warhammer fiction and thought that was cool, I enjoyed that, they're going to enjoy this. It's very much, cut from the same cloth of big stories, epic characters, blood and guts, betrayals, reversals, heroic daring do, and monsters and demons and stuff. So
Yeah.
there's lots for everyone to get behind.
All of that good stuff. Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
that true to your word, we get that in Lords of the Lance as well. For my background on this, it felt like such a treat because you actually suggested this book for me as a really good book. That meant I felt brave enough to go to Ian and say, Graham McNeill says this is going to be a great book. Ian was like, yeah, I guess, we should do some, Warhammer fantasy. That sounds good to me. So we got it onto our list. And I was so excited, Graham, to be out of, Space Marines and bad dads and into what I thought would be, very, very
Happy
toasty.
jolly fun times in the desert.
A banquet, a feast, I was hooked because I knew there was going to be like Pegasus and there was unicorn mentioned. Um, I kind of did go in a bit blindly expecting, oh, maybe it'd be a bit token-esque. And yeah, I mean, I got some of what I wanted and I got a hell of a lot more. It was like a really rollicking
Awesome.
ride. Yeah. So that was,
Yeah, it was a fun book to write, that one. I had a lot of fun with that one.
yeah.
Which, it's one of these things I almost feel like cliched saying that, but you do. I mean, if you're not feeling pleasure and the joy of telling the story and seeing it come to life around you, then something's wrong. If if you hate the thing you're telling, the story that isn't enjoyable to you, like I'm sure we said before, like some people like having written but do not like writing, whereas
Mm.
I love all the aspect. I love getting in front of the keyboard, seeing a story just come to life around me, words and locations that didn't exist before,
Yeah.
just coming to, appearing on the screen before me. And I love that. So if you're not having fun writing it, then maybe it's time to look at what you're writing. But yes, I did. I had a lot of fun going back to the old world because none of us had been there for 10 years. So to
Okay.
sort of rediscover the old world, but not quite the same old world as we left, because this is
Mm.
set several hundred years, or yeah, a good century or so at least before the first great war against chaos and so on. So it's the end times are just the glint in Archaon's eye far in the future. So it was fun to come back to a world that felt familiar, but we were playing in a different time zone in it. So yeah, there's a lot and a different location, because I've not written anything down in the Border Princes and the Badlands before.
Mm. Well, I mean, I can definitely tell you had fun. I mean, there was a lot of every page felt really bursting with color and ideas. I mean, there was so many concepts, set pieces, monsters, characters. I felt really, really epic in that it could have been, potentially one of those like three hefty tomes with those characters in. But it was a really kind of compact read, and I was imagining as I was reading it, uh, in the never ending story, there's the film and the little boy's reading the
Hmm.
and as it's going through, he's getting as haggard as all the characters.
That's, well, they go through the ringer in this book, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely threw the book across the room a few times with this. But what was your connection to the old world? And do you have any fantasy armies? And the other thing that some of my book club buddies wanted me to ask was, what do you think about the world compared to Age of Sigmar? Which doesn't mean as much to me, but it will do to
Sure.
Warhammer fans.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've had a connection to the. I mean, Warhammer Fantasy Battle was the first Games Workshop game that I played way back in the day when, my role-playing campaigns grew in terms of scope and ambition to become more than just dungeon bashing and monster hunting and bandit hunting, killing, what have you. It became, Fate of Nations and all this sort of stuff. And we I wanted to have huge battles, nations at war sort of thing, and role playing systems, rightly don't really cater to that too
Mm.
much. You have to sort of, tell it in a certain way that the characters are moving through isolated moments of it. But I wanted like my players to have to feel the consequence of these things. So, we used the AD&D battle system for a while, largely because a ton of count. The box set I had of it years back had a
Wow.
load of counters that we could use for miniatures because, I was like 15 or something like that. We couldn't afford a lot at the time. But then the AD&D battle system at then that point wasn't a particularly satisfying system to play. And then I don't remember who pointed out, but somebody said, "Oh, this thing called Warhammer." I popped into my Games Workshop in Glasgow and was like, so I got the big orange book, third edition Warhammer Fantasy, and I just loved it, and like gradually, for a while anyway, the role playing elements sort of fell away, and we just started playing Warhammer a lot more. So I've always had a real connection to Warhammer Fantasy. I mean, I ran when I was at school. I ran the Enemy Within campaign, so that's always been there. So and
Wow.
then when I was, the first job I had when I joined the studio was going through the Warhammer rule book and proofing it, making sure all the rules and the summaries matched up with what was in the book and so on. So,
Wow.
and I've written, I don't know exactly how many, but a, a lot,
A
10
lot.
or so. Given the back catalogue I've got now, I need to go back and look at it now to see how
Yeah.
many, but I did a couple of high elf novels, the Ambassador novels, the Sigmar ones. So I do, and the Wood Elf novels. I love the old world. I've had a lot of fun playing in it, and I always wanted to come back to uh, do the great Empire
Mm.
novel at some point, but and finish off my sort of elf triptych, because I've written novels about the high elves, the wood elves, and dark elves appear in the high elf one, but I hadn't ever done a sort of standalone dark elf novel, so I always had a
Yeah.
hankering to do that. But then the end times came along, and the world blew up and became Age of Sigmar, as it does.
As
So I
it
never really got a
does.
chance to as I never got a chance to go back to do that. But with the old world back again now,
Mm.
maybe that's an opportunity. Yeah, I've told loads of stories in that. I worked in the Empire Army book. You know, we all contributed to all the early, the army books back in the day. So I've got a big, long connection with Warhammer. And as to do I have a Warhammer army? Yeah, you can just see in that bottom shelf. There's
Yeah.
my Empire
Ah,
army there.
there you go. There's a winged creature down there as well.
That's an Empire Elector count on Griffin,
Oh, I love it.
alongside the White Wolves and the Spearmen and the Halberdiers and steam tanks,
Oh,
cannons and mortars. Yes, I have an Empire army.
so good. And how lovely that we find out your origin story was influenced by, oh, I need to, going into Games Workshop for your little did you
Mm.
know. that orange book would become a
It
contract.
would be it was my gateway to all sorts of things.
Yeah. Oh, well, luckily for us, that was the gateway. So yeah, wonderful to hear your relationship with the old world. I had to learn quite a lot from Ian, because I didn't really know anything, but he was explaining a bit about how Felix and Gotrek come from old Germany, and these knights come from Bretonia, which is like Warhammer France. So it was kind of modeled around the world that we know. And when I heard that, I
Yes.
thought, this is brilliant because it will have meant, obviously, you're the man who kind of researched Mars in order to write Mechanicus, that you would have researched all of our old world legends and myths. I knew that you would have been able to do some of that stuff. So I was quite excited just to think about. Well, firstly, it's an epic scale. There's so many characters and creatures, but also we really lean into, and I'm going to say Arthurian, um,
Arthurian.
Arthurian. Thank you so much.
There you go.
That's why I have you in my life. Um, and that is the kind of obvious one. I mean, I loved, 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 loved the love story with the ring and the lady in the lake, reversal of the ring going in the lake and all of
Mm.
this. Um, but did you really go bonkers with your research? And could you tell us anything that you kind of dipped out from folklore, or where you were going, how much you knew you'd be able to bring of those kind of stories, but match it with Warhammer content?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, a lot of that content already exists in the Bretonian lore. You know, the Lady of the Lake and all
Mm.
that sort of stuff in Gilles de Breton. You know, the Bretonian ideal of knightly chivalry and honor and so on. That's already there. That's in the Bretonians and has been part of their makeup for a long time. You know, with
Yeah.
the Grail quest. You know, the questing knights and so on. That's been there since before even I joined Games Workshop back in the day. And the Arthurian mythology lays heavily
Mm.
throughout the Bretonian lore and all their various army books. So I can't claim credit for that. I remember when we were first working on it was sixth edition Bretonian army book. It was Ant Reynolds was doing that book. But as always with any book in the studio, whoever was like the named writer, you know, everybody
Mm.
had input and thoughts and made discussions about all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So a lot of what came out of those discussions and that army book's creation fed into a lot of what I drew into this book because they were obviously they were the lore discussions and the mythologies that we had talked about
Yeah.
while Ant was writing that codex. So a lot of that was still very fresh, you know, it was
Yeah.
20 years ago, but it's still very fresh in my mind because, you know, creative conversations where everyone's kind of firing on all cylinders and
Mm.
excited about things, you know, where you feel all these emotions stirring up. Those are the things that allow it to sort of anchor themselves in your memories. You know,
Yeah.
characters and emotions. Those are the things that have got the longest, you know, staying power for people. You know, that's why
Mm.
we remember our favorite books and films and music because of the emotions they stirred up at the time and still
Yeah.
do when you watch it and listen to it or read it and so on. So a lot of that was just coming back to me from those conversations we had back in the day. And sure, I mean, I looked into a lot of when I wanted a snippet of you know something that was not necessarily relevant to the story and the characters, but was added some texture to the sort of
Mm.
warp and weft of the story as a whole. Sure, yeah, you delve into mythology to find what was the original name of this? What is the story
Yeah.
behind the story of the mythology of Arthur and the Lady in the Lake, and where did they come from? Why did they do this, and so on? Just add little bits of verisimilitude here and there as you go through it because you're telling a fantasy story with the undead and dragons and stuff like that. So there's you
Yeah.
know there's a convention you want to maintain, but also if you can provide that little bit of depth to it, it just adds something, even if it's something you can't quite articulate, but you feel that there's more to this than I say just, swords and sorcery and wizards and dragons. There's like
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. That's cool. I love that. But having a little extra to it never hurts.
Well, I could definitely see and feel that. Thank you for explaining that, because as you say, the warp and weft of this felt so, it was like the full tapestry, the full wall hanging. And we were really, the rate of this book was like every page turned, almost something different and incredible was
Mm,
happening. So within that we got this kind of the abundance of the backstory. And I know a lot of readers came to this setting novel knowing so much, but for like a new reader, it was, it's like stepping into that fully fleshed out world where some stuff was already known and assumed, and you learned so much about the culture and everything as you went
yeah,
along, which I think
yeah.
as a writer, if you could teach that, how to keep this action and plot moving, moving, moving with all these
Mhm.
beautiful, embroidered context, legend in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
background. That's a
Well,
skill.
that's always the balancing act you're doing when you're writing something that's part of something already established. Is you know that some of the readers are going to come with,
Mm.
you know, bucketfuls of knowledge of this, and some are going to come with nothing. So you want to cater to both. You want to make sure both are welcome in the book. So I don't want to overload with exposition that's going to bore somebody who already knows it, but nor do I want to leave the person who knows nothing going, who are these guys? What is this thing? I don't know.
Mm.
So it's, a lot of the times I try to use, in this book certainly, like exposition through action. As things happen, it reveals a thing about the culture, the people, the weapon, whatever it is.
Mm.
And having it not all info dumped at the beginning, not, and so there's no conversations. As you know, Jimmy,
Yeah.
the thing is the thing, and yes, I do know that, Jimmy. But
Mm.
did you also know? And it just
Yeah.
dumps it on too heavily handed. So I, I mean, you never know quite how you've succeeded or not until it gets in the hands of readers. But I tried to make sure that there was enough there that newcomers to the lore weren't lost, that veterans weren't just like, yeah, skipping pages because they already knew it. And
Yeah.
it's, you're taking something, you know, a real sort of fantastical type of tale and giving it a grit to it that feels lived in. Because Bretonia as a kingdom has that sort of, like John Boorman's Excalibur of,
Mm.
the fair land of myth and light. But there's also, you get that feeling that there's just a real reality and lived in
Yeah.
quality to the world, even when it's at its peak before it all falls apart.
Mm.
Like when just that mud and the grime, and
Yeah.
it feels like a real place, even as it has that fantastical style of the armor gleaming, the green vibe of the light on their plate and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So that was part of, because Excalibur is one of my favorite films of all time, and it
Oh.
always will be, because it's just a beautiful, amazing, stirring piece of work that in many ways shouldn't work, but kind of does.
Mm.
So I wanted to try and capture some of the flavor of that and the way the knights behaved, and how even as all they were on one course, there was still, you know, not division in the ranks, but there was not everybody was entirely pulling in the same direction, or they
Yeah.
were all there for so many different reasons, even though the main reason was, sure, yeah, we're all here to come and rescue Henri.
Mm.
Um, but everybody had their own different reasons for coming on this quest, and
Yeah.
some would fulfill them, some would not, and some would, have
Yeah.
different outcomes than they were expecting
Yeah.
completely.
Oh, I love that. I think, it was, the little things like, the Knight of Quills just wanted to be a real knight and show
Mm.
himself. And, others were sent, obviously the Grail Knight, who in my head was the Tom Cruise of the scenario. He just has to come because he's a hero. Um, but I definitely think this book would have really, if I'd seen this on a shelf, I think it would have attracted a bunch of newcomers. The cover was awesome, is awesome.
Yes, cool cover.
And, yeah, I think we can talk about the controversy that exploded around this book because there were loads of awesome, strong female characters doing things apparently.
Madness, I know.
What the heck? If you shoot a bow, you really upset a lot of people, Graham, with
I,
night.
I know.
I didn't know
That,
that knights
to
weren't
be
allowed.
fair, that one, you know what, I will mea culpa that one, because that was a sort of not copy paste, a cut error. Because originally there's a scene where, um, who is it? It's Sigurd goes to visit the Pegasus Knights,
Yeah.
And there was this part of that scene was him noting that they had bows on their mounts.
Yeah.
And as I'd written that scene, it felt like I was over explaining a thing that they had bows because, we are scouts and we can hunt from the
Yeah.
air sort of thing and what have you. And it just felt like it was
It
needlessly
probably,
getting into like an excuse for why a thing was there that the rules did not allow. But
yeah.
for all the novels bend, we're not writing codex approved
Yeah.
books. Like if maybe the rules say a space marine captain doesn't have access to this particular gun, but in the stories,
Yeah.
if a space marine captain wants that gun, he's going
He's
to
going to
get
get
it
the gun.
and use it and use it. So it felt like a conversation that was doing too much to try and over explain that. So eventually
Yeah.
I cut it. And then when I came to write the scene where they did use bows, um, without that earlier scene, it
Mm.
just kind of felt like it came out of the blue. It was like, oh, these are knights using bows; they shouldn't be using that. And I was like, yeah, it was supposed to be a scene about how they have them, and it's like a last resort thing, but they only use them for hunting. But the situation that they found themselves in where they did use them was a moment of last resort kind of
Mm.
thing that they had to do to get everybody out safely.
Yeah.
But without that earlier scene to sort of give it some context or caveat on it, it felt like it came out of the blue. And it was in my head when I was writing it, I still had it in mind that that scene existed,
Yeah.
but I'd already, because it did. I mean, I wrote it, but I just cut it and put it into my shoebox file. But I
Yeah.
hadn't actually remembered that it wasn't taken out of the book. So when it,
Well,
went to printers and out the world, I was like, oh yeah, that feels like it comes out of the blue. But I think, of all the units that could use a bow, the aerial ones feel like the ones that
it
most
makes,
likely would.
why would you be a melee only if you are flying up in the air?
Yeah,
But
so part of me is like, you know what? If any unit should get to use it, it'd be them. But
yeah, you could
yes,
have,
it's a philosophical
yeah,
consideration that as honorable knights we don't use bows, and so I get that, but and I will fall on my sword for that one.
yeah. Well, I mean, just to a newcomer, I thought it was just really effing cool. Like, if I'm going up on a Pegasus that's flying, why am I not going to take a bow? I understand the setting in the codex. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, because this one, like I say, it's not just a unit entry doesn't allow for it. It's as a whole, as a philosophical concept, knights don't use bows.
because of
So
the
yeah,
honor, yeah.
I'll take that one in the chin.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good that you've had this opportunity here. I just thought you were
To
getting,
come and confess my sins.
yeah, but don't tell us any of the big ones, Graham. I don't think I could handle the big fish.
I'm
Um,
not after reflection cracked, no. But
okay.
we'll table that one for another day.
Okay, wait. Okay, yes. So the other one was people were really cross that there were so many women in this, which I kind of pick up on in general. Like I think I told you there was a day where I took a short break from the internet when it was announced that there could be female custodies because I got some not so
Yes.
nice stuff directed my way. With this, there wasn't that. It was just more moaning and grumbling. But as a newcomer to the hobby, it felt incredibly natural. I felt all of the characters earned their place in the story. Nothing was driven by the fact that their gender is thus and therefore they are in the
Oh,
story.
and it was never written with the intent of, right, well, I'm going to introduce girl bosses because I know that'll annoy people. It did not. It was never. There was no agenda to it. It was just like, who would be interesting characters to tell in this story?
Yeah.
And Carolina, the daughter of the Baron,
Mm.
felt like a natural extension because her father has to maintain the castle. The brother is missing because he went first because he was the brother.
Yeah.
Um, so she felt like an absolutely natural inclusion. The Pegasus Knights just felt like it would be just cool
Yeah.
to have them. This all-female
Um,
unit of flying Pegasus Knights just felt that's kind of cool. I
yeah.
like that.
And
And
and then you've
I
got
can't think that.
the ladies
Yeah.
who are
And
of that
the ladies of
order.
the maidens of the Levy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean they're always. I mean, in that one, I don't think anybody had an issue with because they're always female, so that's
Yeah.
a given. Um,
It's
but yes,
interesting, isn't it?
I don't know. I think it's you know everyone's entitled to their own opinion on a book. They can like it or not based on what they're seeing and so on in it. But I I set out to tell just a cool story with cool characters, a good mix of men and women. And then there was, like I say, there was no intent to upset people. There was no intent to, send a message or
Mhm.
deliver any particular woke agenda to people. It was just like, these are going to be cool characters. And
Yeah,
that was part of the discussions we had at the beginning of the book. That in the upcoming Bretonian Army book that there were going to be the availability for female knights. Okay, that's cool.
there
Let's
we
go.
go.
I shall put some in the book then.
Well, I yeah,
Because it's
I
not like nobody held a gun to my head and said, you must put the female knights into the book. And I didn't blackmail any of my editors saying, I'm going to do this and you're going to let me. It was what felt natural and good and interesting for the texture of the book.
yeah.
Because, as a Bretonian army as it stood, it would have been very male dominated completely. The whole book would have been men, apart from the two ladies of the late, the two maidens of the handmaidens of the lady, rather. So that felt like it was a bit sterile and less interesting.
I think I think for me, each of the characters added their own kind of particular thread color to this tapestry, and in particular, the dynamic of being a daughter where, the son is favored and then having to go on a quest, and the
Mm.
dynamic of, I have an oath because I belong, I'm part of this the lake ladies. Sorry, where are my words today?
The Lake
It,
Ladies, I like that one
thank
better.
it adds
Handmaidens of the Lady.
Thank you. It adds strength to to the strength, the texture, the colors of the story. I found
Yeah.
it marvelously rich. It was really much more immersive, because you wanted to know all the stories of these very different characters. And I'm used to reading, I think, for example, my latest Raven Guard heresy book. It's all boys
Hmm.
throughout, and that's great. And it's a fantastic dynamic. You have brotherhood, betrayal, yada, yada, yada. But there is an extra texture when you have this mixing. And
Yeah, I think so. Because that's
yeah,
life.
yeah, it is. It's
Nobody
real
goes through
life.
life only encountering one gender. I
Yeah,
mean, that's just not how life works. And I think you're closing yourself off as a writer from all kinds of drama and story and fiction and history if you
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
stick to if it's just the boys, the No Girls Allowed club kind of thing. But
Yes,
like yes, and it offers a lot of interesting wrinkles to the cat is the relationships between the characters that make them interesting in the course of a book. And relationships don't need to be romantic. It can be, any kind of
mm,
relationship. And having like the history between the handmaiden and Varro was
yeah.
that
Well, I wanted
added
to
something
say,
interesting.
yes, Graham, this is like a love story, unrequited love.
Yeah,
And
which is a courtly love because it's a very knightly thing.
yeah, and I was gonna say, like, how is it for you getting to write a love story? Because we know that you excel at all this kind of, very grimdark, gory action, all of this stuff. Um, so yeah,
Well, I am a multifaceted individual, and I am a softie at heart, despite all the horrible things that I often put my characters through. I am a big soppy romantic at heart. I love, I will watch and consume love stories, rom-coms, Terrifier 3, all the things and everything in between. If you tell me a good story with good characters, I will watch it regardless or read it regardless of the
yeah,
genre.
and
And Warhammer novels allow you a bit more flexibility to get into, male-female relationships that 40K stories often don't allow you that because it's just all grim all the time and everybody's at war.
yeah,
Whereas the Warhammer world, yes, always at war as well. And there's threats from every direction as well. But the people and the humans in it they're much more relatable to us as you and I
yeah,
because they're so much closer to us in terms of, yeah, we can imagine these people living in their village, having their loves, their rivalries with their neighbor and all the rest of it. They feel more like us than a citizen of the 41st millennium does. So it's much, when I say easier, that's not quite the right word, but it feels more like it should be part of the textures to have that in this kind of story than it might
Yeah.
in a 40K novel.
Well, I was really, really delighted. It was a real welcome treat. And again, this book in many ways felt like a reward to me going through the desert of battle. And I mean, I will say, and we can talk about this, I think it is the most grimdark, maybe of all the books I've read. Um, but the love story was handled so delicately with such panging and longing against this horrific backdrop. It felt like real moments of like, we can breathe here, the human emotions
Mm.
coming in. So I was very appreciative of it. And I loved it. And I would love to read more Graham McNeill love stories.
Hey, Warhammer romance. I think it's a line that needs to happen.
And
Crime, horror, romance. Why not?
I mean, let's run it, Graham. We'll send the pitch document. But this is really, really very grim and dark. We have not only beloved family dying and going missing, the corpses of these families turn against loved ones. We have noble Pegasus knights head-butted and stepped on, smushed by a giant. We think everything's safe, and then, a carrion knight flies out. I mean, and the trampling, the goring, the, being cleft in twain. It's incredibly viscerally bloody, and we get that
Mm.
real sense of medieval. It's not rifles or blasters, it's like hacking the shit out of each other.
Swords and
Yeah.
maces and yeah,
Yeah.
it's up close and personal, which a lot of 40K is too.
Yeah.
Um,
But as alongside this, it's the nobility, being crushed and smashed, the Grail Knight coming to an end, the dynasty, everyone's dying.
mhm,
Okay, let me start this question so I don't sound like a moron. I noticed it's incredibly grimdark, and there are a slew of monsters that we encounter. But also, it really does take the bloody stakes to the nth degree. I
mhm.
wondered if there was a pressure on you to include this amount of monsters, because so much new stuff is coming out. It's the launching of new Oldhammer. Is this what old Warhammer world is about? Is this where the true grimdark lies on the battlefields, swords width apart from each other?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that in it. Yeah, I mean, but there was certainly no, I mean, no pressure. Certainly, Hannah, who's my editor on this, was a joy to work with, and she was always really receptive to ideas. I want to have one of these guys and one of this guy and so on. But it was really just a case of getting back into the army books and some of the new stuff that was coming in the books and thinking, what would be the cool toys to play with? Like using uh, the Tomb Queen for starters was interesting, and just plucking bits out of the lore that really appealed to me, and just think, what would that be? Where would I use that? Can I use that? Does it make sense to use this, and so on? So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to it starts off as a very grounded tale, that's quite, realistic in the sense of how things are happening, the logistics and so on. But then I wanted to sort of remember, this is Warhammer, giant bone giants coming
Mhm.
up and giant snake riding lich priests and so on. So I literally just went through. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Where can you use that? And I want some of it was throwbacks to old Warhammer, like the giant that you talked about a little bit earlier. I mean that's the old Marauder edition giant from Warhammer back in the day, even down to his the barrel he's got on his side, the patchwork clothing. That's the
Yeah.
miniature that they released like way back in
Wow.
like the I don't know
What,
mid '90s or something like that.
90s?
Something like yeah, it might be mid '90s, early late '80s is one, but it's a lot of it is trying to like call back to like real, deep cuts from lore to the old Warhammer grognards who remember it from back in the day, sort of thing. So
Mm.
it's trying to, like looking forward to what is coming in the new Warhammer, Tomb Kings, Bretonians, but also like a lot of nods to the lore or the miniatures of the past.
Wow. I no, I really I adored getting this menagerie of monsters, even though, just to hold you to account, like everything was so grimdark and
Yeah.
relentless. There was a really beautiful moment. I loved it. You wrote this gorgeous scene where they'd found a shipwreck. They'd had some
Mm.
victories. They'd escaped. and there was, people were doing normal things. They were playing cards, eating, and, chilling out. And then, the launch of the
And it's
giant
thump,
and yeah.
thump, thump.
So, so good. I thought, yeah, it was really great, again, as a newcomer, to see this breadth and range.
Yeah,
So
because you
so
want that. You need in any story, you need that sort of tension and release.
yeah.
Anytime you've had these big, powerful moments, like the scene in the castle with the ghouls and the carrion, the flying Death Knight thing, big set piece. Lots of people get killed. Lots of people get really badly hurt in there. So having just a moment of
Yeah.
relax now. We're all safe. This is all good. Nothing bad could possibly happen to us at this point. And then that's just not the case. It's not Warhammer. I mean, it's like the first rule of horror movies is, you are never as safe as you think.
No.
So and this point, I wanted to give the characters a moment to breathe, a moment
Yeah.
to be people, be humans with one another rather than, you know, so many times we see characters in these kind of stories who don't behave like humans in the sense of they don't get scared, they don't get tired, they don't get thirsty, sort of
Mm,
thing. So I wanted a moment to show them where they just sort of let their hair down and just relaxed a little bit and just did stuff that normal people would do. And then,
yeah.
of course, snatch that away from them before it gets too comfy.
Well, I really love those little intervals that you give us. I mean,
They're
another
fun
vote.
moments, yes.
Yeah, another vote for Warhammer Romance. Imagine cozy Warhammer, Graham. I mean, so
I think it's a real bit of a dichotomy there, juxtaposition.
we'll make it happen. Um, so yeah, I mean, there were so many things that I loved. I'm gonna wrap us up here so I don't keep you all night. But the skill that was required to manage that huge cast and keep it moving, I thought was epic.
Mm.
It was a real, yeah, it was a real beautiful study in how to do it. I was imagining you with your map of characters, your spreadsheet, you're
A
ready
little
to
bit, yeah.
spin.
Ensembles are tricky because you want to make sure that the main characters or who you feel are the main characters take up most of the stage, but
Yeah,
that nobody gets forgotten about, that everybody has a
yeah,
moment to shine, everyone has a big scene or has their own believable reasons for why they are here and doing things that you ultimately care about, hopefully.
yeah. Yeah, kudos. This kind of stuff should be studied. I really enjoyed the fact that you decided you were going to have a deaf character as part of the
Mm,
story. No big fanfare, but that character fit in so well. Um, And I loved this is a huge spoiler, so 3-second warning for anyone who doesn't want a spoiler.
mm,
I loved the way that the big bad, Amaranthe,
mm.
who it's just been death continually, all at the sacrifice, death, zombie, all these bad, revenants coming for them, and that the way that that character was put down was with life. I
Life,
thought
yeah.
that was, chef's kiss, and there was a great line, something like, "She's on the edge of a chasm," and then, "Well, let's kick her over, bitch." It was like, "Yes, finally," it was such a
Well,
fantastic
it's one
crescendo.
of these. That one was that grew out of the fact that I always liked of the, you know, having a MacGuffin that you almost don't notice at the beginning that then comes back to save the day, or
Yeah.
be a terrible. Oh shit! This is actually a nuke we were carrying. It's the amulet that the Lich priest had
Yeah.
on him to sort of cover up the fact that he was a Lich priest, that he was pretending to be
Mm,
human, but he knew that certainly the handmaiden, the lady, would be able to tell that something's not right about this guy. So he had that life,
yeah.
the solid piece of life magic essentially around his neck was giving
Yes.
him the appearance of vitality and humanity that he didn't truly
Mm.
possess. And then having that come back to be the very thing that she gave him to masquerade as human is the thing that comes back to bite her in the ass at the end.
So, so, so good. Such a great feeling of like,
Mm.
"Ah, I get it." And then the final thing that they get home, not all of them,
Not
uh,
all of them.
limp back, but we just know the Tomb King has been awoken. Like,
Mm.
so really setting the scene for the next traumatic tragedy that's going to roll
Yes.
across
I
the
mean,
whole
this
world.
was certainly written with the idea, like, you know. you write things to be satisfying in their own right. So you have a beginning and a middle and end.
Mm.
Whether it's told in that order doesn't matter, but you have those things. And this book was intended to be that if this ends here, okay, the
Yeah.
characters still got some closure. You know, there's stories still to tell about them. But I feel that this adventure that they have been on is completed.
Mm.
So I certainly, I mean, I wrote it with the idea that I have several, another two books at least in mind for this. Whether we ever get to do them or not is another matter. But yeah, having one where the undead come across the water. So, the humans sort of poke,
No.
they poked the hornet's nest and awoke something, or they were there just for its awakening. But now, like Cetra, who's kind of a big deal
Mm.
in Warhammer
Tiny
Undead
big deal.
history. He is kind of a big deal. He's going to be coming north with his undead hosts across the water to basically invade the Border Princes in the old world and so on. And the Border Princes as a location has historically always been a sort of it's like the Kislev, but of the south.
Mm.
It bears the brunt of a lot of invasions from the south, the orcs from the Badlands, undead.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, and orcs and undead from the Badlands coming north tend to hit the Border Princes first, which
Oof.
is why it's this sort of lawless, disorganized robber barons type place.
Yeah.
So if the opportunity arises to do more with that, then there's
More
rough
adventure.
outlines in place for what the second and third book would be.
Oh gosh. I will steal
And
my son to
and
read that.
they don't worry, they will be happy, joyous occasions of frivolity and
Yeah.
pie making.
Hooray! Pie making. Well, I'm gonna do a new thing, which I've never done before. I think
Oh,
because I've got you, Graham, for a little bit longer, and we're gonna have a discussion about the reflection cracked, but I'm very shy to talk about it. So I think we could
yes.
say goodbye to all my main people who've just stumbled across my YouTube channel. And why don't we talk about the reflection cracked for my Patreon and YouTube members who I know a bit better? And then it won't be so embarrassing.
Yeah, no,
Um,
savage. We'll have ourselves a safe word.
safe words. Oh lordy. Well,
This
yeah.
the safe word is Zendaya.
Can you see I'm actually wearing blush, but I'm still blushing beneath it. So thank you so, so much for our Lords of the Lance chat, Graham. So
No, my pleasure. Always fun to talk about.
yeah,
You know, a book that means a lot actually because I returned to Warhammer and I really enjoyed getting to play in that
yeah.
uh arena again.
Well, it meant a lot to me because you recommended it for me, and I thought this human sees what I love, so that was really special for me.
Yeah, and there's just, there's a little bit of self-aggrandizement saying, "Here's a book you'd like." Oh, by the way, I wrote it.
Feel free to do that anytime. But thank you. So let's say goodbye to our YouTube friends. Thanks so much. Bye.